All right, so anybody that's been following Lionheart Radio, particularly my journey over the last probably couple years, has realized that I have a keen interest on evolutionary biology. Specifically because as I take a step back and I look at some of the issues that we are kind of currently dealing with in our culture, it seems to me that almost every major issue with the human condition right now stems from the fact that we're trying to take our biology and we're trying to shove it into technology. And that evolution hasn't taken place yet. And so it seems like we're kind of hitting up against the wall of technology. And so, Ashley, you're here today and you've had an interesting journey because you've gone from naval officer to this kind of nutritionist that's like living on a farm, and you've kind of totally exited the rat race because it seems like you've come to that same conclusion. Is that correct?
Yes.
So like let's try to rewind a little bit, because when you think of naval officer, you think of somebody that's very much a part of the system, right? And the system to me kind of includes a lot of the accepted norms of today. But it seems like you're kind of rejecting a lot of those norms in the way that you're practicing health and the way that you're practicing it with your clients, because you kind of take much more of a functional medicine, holistic approach to your nutrition. So when we talk about that, are we talking about like paleo or?
Usually paleo template, but some people don't do well on the paleo template. So it's more finding what works best person to person.
Okay. And so why did you decide that you wanted to leave the rat race in the first place?
It stems from childhood.
Okay.
So when I go back to childhood and reminisce, I found much of myself in the woods and on my family's farm. So that helped me understand my career trajectory later in life. But your 20s are kind of for that discovery.
Right.
So in my younger childhood, I was outside a lot, playing, very playful, as many children are. And as I progressed into high school, I got into the format, sports, academics, student government, which then led me to the format of college. Okay. And then the early career format.
Right.
But by then, it felt like I was being strangled. That's the only word I can think of. It just wasn't the authentic fit for me.
Right.
So then when I got out of the Navy, I loved it, but it just wasn't for me long term.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you kind of took this traditional path that is almost pushed on all of us growing up, right? Like that's kind of the expected route. Mm-hmm. And so when you got out of the Navy and you were like, oh, this just doesn't feel authentic. I mean, did you get right into farming right away? Because I don't know a lot of farmers in 2018. Mm-hmm. So there must have been people that thought, like, what are you doing? You know?
No, I spent 2 years. I had another baby at home, which is a very much a self-discovery process when you birth your child at home. And then I took a couple of years to just think and ponder what made me feel happy when I was younger, and just started really analyzing those parts of my life and said what made me feel authentic and in the right place. Was growing up on the farm and being outside in nature and just being really quiet a lot of the time.
Okay.
So I just said, well, how can I turn that into a career? It's a little tricky.
Well, okay, and so that's a good segue, because how are you turning that into a career? Are you kind of like advising people or just helping people get back to their roots? Or?
I am. I do one-on-ones and I have some group programs, but as a practitioner, that can't be a full-time gig or we burn out.
Right.
So the whole portfolio of the career choices is the farm, the functional medicine work, a little bit of passive income, work smarter, not harder, because I have to walk my talk for my own health.
Right.
I cannot spend all day seeing people one-on-one.
Yeah.
And
so that's an interesting conversation in itself to me, because along with the traditional path that you mentioned, the other thing that it seems like is very expected today in society is that you have one thing, right? Like that's your job. And so to be dabbling in all of these things that you constantly have, because different parts of you require different percentages, right? Like it's interesting because I think we talk about balance in today, right? Everyone's like, oh, you gotta have balance, you gotta have balance. But balance always assumes that like things are equal. When in reality, like for me, there's times where I know like I need to be plugged into my business and on my computer and doing that. Like I really enjoy that stuff. There's also a part of me that needs to unplug, and it's not the same percentage, but there's a part of me that needs to unplug and go into the mountains and just hike and run and do all of these things. And so as you've kind of carved out this niche for yourself in your own life, how has the reaction been?
Very mixed.
Yeah.
And I think there will always be a mixed set of emotions with everybody around you. If there's a before and an after person, when people go through these so-called transformations,
Right.
and you start putting up boundaries and you start getting outside of the box that you were in with all those people,
Yeah.
you will lose friends for sure. You'll confuse people, and you'll also help people. You just go through a pretty wide array of raw emotions, and I think that's why a lot of people don't want to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think people start down that change path for a minute and they realize the adverse reactions they're getting, and then they instantly like shrink back because, part of you changing is you getting uncomfortable. But then a huge part of it is as you try these new things, you're going to make everybody around you uncomfortable because they really want to be able to label you. Like people really want to be able to identify you as one thing. But as I've found, as I've kind of gone through my own evolution of going from military to business to these different things that I'm interested in, it's almost always worth it. Like it's almost always worth it to push through and get to that evolution that or try to be that person that you want to become, because you're going to affect a whole new group of people. And I'm sure that's what you've seen.
I have seen that. I do agree. I think it can be a sad story and a happy story at the same time, and that's why a lot of people don't want to go through with it. Because if everyone's always looking to label you, if I'm a functional medicine practitioner and went to functional medicine school, then they think I know, then I'm just going to be a nutrition expert.
Right.
But then if I'm harping on digital detoxes, but then I'm on Instagram, I'm going to be judged for that. So it's just figuring out.
Yeah, right.
Figuring out where you fit in is not what I want to do, but it's what people pigeonhole you into. I just want to belong with myself.
Right.
And anybody else who wants to belong with me can join me.
Right.
That's not really the social norm.
Yeah, definitely not. And so that brings up another question, which is like, so you found that you being back closer to nature, would you say, is probably like where you identify?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, but you can't unplug from the world completely, right? It's not, at this point in 2018, that's not something that, and so I often I wonder, how do we balance this need of we still have these almost like archaic human needs that we evolved, this idea that we need to be outside and we need to play and we need to run and jump and lift and eat foods that we were designed to eat, or we evolved to eat, I guess would be a better way to put it. But at the same time, if I'm not on Instagram, my business, I'm not making money, my business isn't going, there's a lot of things that, unplugging is not an option. So how do you start finding that balance?
Well, I do always think of it in terms of other people who I feel like need to come out of the woods a little bit. Some of my colleagues, you need to come out and teach people and help people.
Do you have a lot of hippie friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where we tend to go. We say, well, we don't want to be part of the system. I don't want to, we don't want to be on social media. We don't want to. But how does that help humanity beyond your little commune or your little intentional community? And I think we need public speakers in that camp or in that type of sector. And you don't have as many of those people coming out and speaking on social media and getting rid of the ego and the vanity issues because we don't want to.
Yeah.
But that's how I overcome the conundrum of, the Monday morning effect, where I have to come back to it.
Right.
That doesn't end just because the career is a different career now.
Right.
Because humanity needs it. The civilized world needs to hear this type of, mindset or lifestyle to give them other options, I guess.
And so, when you talk about this other option, though, I mean, what, when we talk about this, what are we doing for people? What are you actually, what do people need? They just need to know that they should probably get closer to nature, or where, do you know what I'm saying?
I think more than anything, people don't know how to hear their own voice. What's going on inside, to wake up every day and say, today I don't feel like doing this. I do feel like doing that. It's a pretty loud voice.
Right.
I mean, it's a primal voice. We have a biological voice within us that kind of helps guide our needs for the day.
Okay.
But I do feel like we block it with some modern inputs. And so people wake up every day just kind of foggy and lost and just not sure. And so that's a really wide array of where they could go. Nature seems to be one of those places to find and tune into the voice slowing down, not overscheduling, placing value on yourself so that your time is lean and you're not just wasting time with people who don't matter in your life.
Yeah.
Those, main 5 tenets seem to kind of home in on that ability to tap into that voice and see who
Do you
you
meditate?
are. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, one of the things that I'm instantly going to think of, because I think people are probably going to think of this as well. If you say like, you need to listen to that voice, what do you want to do today? Like, what is it that your soul's kind of yearning to do? It's not go to work, right? So people are going to wake up and be like, right. So if I listen to that, I would like lose my job and so like that's what I mean. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you balance
It
that?
definitely has to be a structured implementation plan. It can't just be, all right, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
it can't be like
Right.
that. There needs to be structure and a plan for that. If you have to provide for your family and yourself, it can't just be this permissive, I'm just going to do whatever I want and
Right.
go out in the field and twirl. I mean, that doesn't work.
Right. And that's honestly my problem with a lot of hippies, to be honest with you. Like, it's like you're not doing it. You're not making a difference. I get that you're like, happy or whatever, but you think of hippies as these people that are kind of chasing butterflies in the field, and they're not like really. And so it's like, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's like I've been to like a lot of festivals and I've kind of like, I've done psychedelics with people and I've gone through all these different things. And it's like, you have to, I think the greatest challenge is to take these things that and figure out a way to synthesize them and make them make sense for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be, a really difficult challenge.
It is. Ancestral health, we understand that, but we live in a money-driven society. So if you want to have a sense of freedom, you need to have financial freedom to have personal freedom. If you want to live in America,
right,
that's just what you have to do.
Yeah.
So then you have to come up with solutions to your lifestyle problems that are monetized.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is, and you can do that in an ethical, beautiful philanthropist type of way. So I think that's where people get confused. It's that if you're not doing the corporate thing or the military thing, then what are you doing?
Right, exactly. What's that?
Are you rolling? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Someone's here to pick up their eggs
over in the cooler bag by my desk.
Are they going to know which ones they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep, that's the real world.
Yeah, might just leave that in there. Somebody just came by to buy eggs from you?
Right. I mean, I'm here working.
Yeah.
And I bring in eggs. People pick up eggs. I mean, it's a very multi-dimensional.
So that couldn't have been any more serendipitous. You're literally making money from your farm right now while we're talking.
I'm making money right now.
Okay. And so that's it though, right? Like that is like, if you're going to exist in this society, we've decided that money is the way. And so, it's hard not to look at it, because I grew up looking at money as this like almost evil thing. Like that's just what I was taught, right? But at the end of the day, like now I look at it as freedom tokens, right? Absolutely. It's like, how many of those things can I gather so I don't have to participate in this bullshit?
So
you know
true.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It is so true.
Right. So when you're working with somebody and you want to take this kind of functional medicine approach or functional nutrition approach, where do you start?
We usually start at the lower end of Maslow's triangle. We have to get the food, sleep. We have to get all that right for the first 3 months or so. And then we start to dig in deeper.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people might not understand what that is. So that basically, do you want to explain it?
Sure. Yeah. It's a triangle, and on the bottom wide sector are the primal needs that we have of food, sleep, hydration, sex, and then you go up. There might be a few more. Mm-hmm. You go up more into intimacy, relationships, and then you go up a bit more. So the basic would be sex. The next would be like intimacy and your relationship stability, and not just the primal needs for affection. And then above that is your self-esteem, so your inner workings. And then at the very top is self-actualization. Right, and that's like self-actualization's like this desire to grow, right? Right. It's not enlightenment. People get confused about that. That's not really a direct correlation, but just that desire to grow and serve. And this hierarchy, it gives humans a good understanding of essentially like the way, what's the best way to put this? The things that we need in order to prosper in life. Right. Right. Okay. And to be social creatures together.
Yep.
right? So if we're all just hovering at the bottom and barely able to maintain just those basic needs, our ability to be a social species together is hindered.
Right.
Because we have a social brain. We're wired to be social.
Okay.
So.
And so this is an interesting thing. I think a lot of people think, okay, 2018, I mean, with all of the safety nets in place, food, water, shelter is essentially handled. But I would argue, and I'm curious, so you don't think so either. So
no.
Why don't you think so?
We are food. We're fed. We have food, but we're fogged by food. That's why I always say, fogged by food is not going to help. You cannot gravitate up to any of the other areas if you're glazed over with inflammation and lack of nutrients.
Yeah.
So and we have water, but again, no one's drinking water anymore. They're drinking sodas and monster drinks. That's not hydration. So and that's why no one's really focusing on that in terms of Maslow. No, we're good there.
Right.
We can go up now. We graduated, but we aren't graduating at all. Most people are fogged over.
And so that's like probably the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like if you were to try to how do I improve my life? It's like that's the one thing you're going to do every day regardless. Well, food, and then you mentioned sleep, water, these things. That's probably the thing you could change right away to make the biggest difference in your life.
Yes. And what I've seen, at least in clinical practice in my own life, is I couldn't, and I'll say clients being able to tap into those upper areas of self-work without getting rid of that inflammation and that fog effect.
Yeah, you can't.
It's inaccessible.
Yeah, that is interesting too. And it's like, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but you're just not operating at your peak capacity, right?
Right.
So I always recommend, to start like whole real food, something like the Whole30. It gives people something that they can understand and conceptualize and just do. But you're saying that you don't think the paleo type's great for everybody. So how do you even begin to figure out what people need?
I actually home in more on sugar.
Okay.
And just get people off of.
So that's like the first thing, sugar's out.
Right, because then if they can replace that bad habit that's creating a fog and also overcome an addiction to that pleasure and replace that addiction with a different pleasure, you're actually tapping into 2 eliminations at the same time. And generally, if you cut out processed sugar, you're going to eat a more whole food template. I used to do just the full paleo template, and I have since just kind of simplified it.
Okay.
You
So what do you think people can eat that's not paleo? Or
Well, I mean, I tell them to cut out gluten.
Yeah.
I at least ask them to, because if you look at the sugar addiction, we're talking about refined flours too. So it does imply, but then they can still have quinoa.
Okay.
White rice.
Okay.
It just depends on how standard American their diet is.
Yeah.
Because what I see with things like Whole30, which I'm a big fan, they're friends of mine. It's so strict that it's not the greatest path for addiction recovery. You have a lot of people going off the wagon, back on the wagon, off the wagon. And I just need people to get on the wagon and not get back off. It's their own wagon. Like they don't need to get off of it.
Right.
But it takes longer. It takes a longer time to do that. It's not 30. It's not a Whole30. It's a whole life. And when you eliminate so much so quickly, and you're talking about addiction, which most of the time we are talking about multiple addictions in life, it's very traumatic for that person.
Yeah, because I'm not really keen on the science, but there's an actual like biological addictive process that's taking place when you eat sugar. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's called a hyperpalatable food, and so it taps into the pleasure center of the brain where dopamine's produced. So it actually is an addictive substance like cocaine.
Okay.
It actually has a very similar addiction profile.
That's actually really good for me to hear, because for a while, we have a place called Sugar Shack up here on Shore Drive. For a while, I was like, I would stop in and I would get a donut on my way to work, right? And when I decided to stop doing that, I'm talking like probably 3 months. Every morning I have to drive by this goddamn Sugar Shack, and I would like literally feel like not like my palms were sweating. Like I felt like compelled to take a left and go in there. And even if I'm like, no, like consciously, like I don't want that, I don't want to eat that. It was like wild how like strong that compulsion to go eat a goddamn donut really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And a lot
I
of
can
people
speak
don't
to that.
talk about that side as much. I mean, there's a few pieces of literature on it, but most people think of sugar as just detox, metabolic response stuff, like diabetes territory. We don't really talk enough about the addictive nature of it
Yeah,
because that's just a very touchy topic.
right,
You know?
right. And right, people don't like to. I mean, if you admit that, then like you have to like face that in your own life. And if you go to start cutting sugar out of like, I've had a lot of people tell me like, well, I don't eat sugar, because they're not eating the candy. But it's like, right, well, you're drinking milk because that's 8 grams of sugar right there from most places. And so there's just this. It's found its way into all of the food in the standard American diet, and so it's actually really, really difficult to get rid of that one thing.
It is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if I just can help someone focus on just that,
Yeah.
then we just incrementally can work on the other stuff later. I'm not going to get hung up on, quinoa because that's not paleo friendly. I'm just going to say, let's just focus in on this one particular thing.
Okay.
Because when we focus on that, we're going to be peeling back layers that are very emotional. And then we'll work on that. That's how I'm more of the, let's look at your trauma. Let's look at childhood issues. Let's, more the psychology side of things.
Yeah.
Or social behavior.
Okay. Okay. So then, what else is in that first? You mentioned sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's just a matter of getting 8 hours or whatever.
Just sleep hygiene.
Okay.
And then most people report having trouble falling to sleep. So a little bit of the, turn off the blue screen type of stuff before bed.
Right.
Things like that. And then movement. A lot of my clients are already exercising a lot. Some are over exercising, some are under, but most just aren't moving enough throughout the day. You say, well, I just need you to record 15,000 steps a day. And it's pretty eye-opening.
Okay.
How they are not moving enough throughout the day.
Right.
Which, ancestrally speaking, we have to do.
Right, because we evolved to hunt and gather
until recent. I mean, even in the agricultural era, we were still moving all day. So
right,
it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that we stopped moving, and that wasn't very long ago. So we have not evolved for sedentary lifestyle at all.
Right, I'm interested in that because it's like a lot of people like they hit the gym hard, especially because CrossFit's exploded in the last few years. But if you look at the model, it's like. Yeah, it's better. It's a step in the right direction. 1,000% people should be working out. But this idea that you sit all day for 8 hours and then you go to a gym and you go hard as fuck for an hour and then you go home and go, it's like, I don't know that that's the model. I don't know that that's right. Because, as you're sitting, like your hips are getting tight, your ankles are losing mobility, all these things. Almost everybody sits all day long and then they go straight to the gym and they go as hard as they can. It doesn't seem like that's conducive to how we evolved either.
No, we didn't evolve to exercise. We just evolved to live.
Move,
live, lift things. I know now that I'm a farmer that organized exercise is not a requirement for me like it used to be. Because during the farming season, it is in the winter, but in the farming season, it's not.
Like you're just moving all day, doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a tractor. I won't ever have one. I have a wheelbarrow, and I'm going to do 25 loads if that's what it takes.
Right.
And allow for time to do that. Damn. And have a primal physique from that.
Yeah.
And try not to waste away to nothing because caloric intake needs to be high enough. But I've literally seen it.
Yeah.
And it's a conceptual idea that I put into practice because I went from being a professional triathlete to.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
you were?
In the Navy. I was on the Navy tri team.
Damn.
And just, traveled around the world doing some fun triathlons.
Yeah.
My body was kind of achy and hurting a little bit and asking, well, why is this happening? To getting pregnant and having 4 children and watching the body do all sorts of interesting things to now saying, okay, well, I have the option to be as primal as I want. I want to practice and see what all this is all about in my actual life and get 30, 50,000 steps, quote unquote, in a day, nonstop, all day long. Sometimes I'll go out all day and only eat from the garden and that's it.
Yeah.
Just water from, the hose and vegetables from the garden and then come back in and eat. I mean, it's really fun to do those kinds of social experiments on myself.
Right.
To see how my body responds.
Yeah, I agree. I like that as well. It's like you just take this idea, apply it to your life, see if it's useful, and if it's not, then get rid of it. But you can do that with almost anything.
Yeah. Just share it. And the same with my children. I mean, they look small on the growth charts. They're very low on all those percentages, but they are just primal little children.
What does that mean?
They intermittently fast whenever they feel like it. They wake up and they're like, I'm not hungry. And I don't say, well, you have to eat.
Yeah, right.
They can hear their little intrinsic voice better than I can hear my own because they've been raised this way since birth. I mean, we had them at home. We homeschool them. I mean, they're off the beaten path. And they have this ability to just hear what they need better than I know what they need.
Right.
And so their little physiques are just all popped out with muscle, and they eat when they need to and don't eat when they don't want to, and drink. We don't do like 3 meals a day and 2 or 3 snacks or whatever the modern prescription for rearing children is.
Right.
We don't follow that.
It seems like we're almost conditioned, because now that you mention it, to like almost ignore our intuition, right? Like eating's not intuitive, moving's not intuitive. We're taught like you're going to sit here and learn all day and you're going to eat when it's time to eat. And then, and we're such opportunistic creatures that it seems like that doesn't make any sense for us either.
No, we're wired for abundance. If we have the ability to have everything given to us at that moment, we're going to try to take it. Because ancestrally, we didn't have that. And so when you had resources, you eat, you sleep, you take, you have sex, you do all these things when it's available to you.
Right.
But now it's always available. So we have to actually, like Dr. Lieberman says in his book, you have to kind of flip that upside down and you have to do the opposite. And you have to say, I am wired for abundance, and therefore I have to now learn how to not oblige all the resources I have available to me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we're hardwired to survive at the end of the day. But survival in itself used to lend itself to meaning. Now you will get, in fact, like now you have to almost fight that desire in a lot of ways, because if you are opportunistic, the opportunity is always there, essentially, is what we're kind of getting at. Yeah, so that's super interesting. All right, so I want to go to the kids thing, but I want to take a step back. So you're a professional triathlete. People can't see this right now because it's audio, but you seem fit. You don't formally work out?
Not only twice a week at a gym, because I won't lift weights at home.
But it's movement.
It's all movement. On the days that there's not enough movement, I'll pop on my spin bike or go do a run outside with the kids. But, generally speaking, no.
And how many steps a day do you think you're getting? Or do you have any idea?
During peak farming season, well over 30,000, maybe 50 on Sundays.
Damn.
It's morning till night.
I think people would be surprised how much simply walking would do for their health. Like how
that's
much
what most of it is too.
Yeah.
If the compost heap is over here and the garden is 200 yards over the other way, and I'm doing 40 loads, it's just walking.
Yeah.
There's some lifting.
Right. We had Dr. Andy Galpin on, exercise physiologist, Dr. Bioenergetics. And one of the things he was saying is he's like, we're digging into the research now. We're finding out that like this 10,000 steps prescription, that's actually like bare minimum to not die super fast. Like that's all that is. And that's a bummer because, Fitbits, Garmin's, all these things, people, they're wired to tell you like, oh, you hit 10,000 steps, you're at your goal for the day. And then people are like, oh, thank God I can go sit on the couch and watch Netflix now. And it's like, right, but to not die super fast. Like there's, we were not, 10,000 steps is just such a minimum. It's like we should really probably look for more. Okay, so that's wild. So you grew up doing triathlon?
Playing soccer, actually, and then I moved to triathlon, that sport in college.
Okay.
So,
do you ever compete now?
Some ultra trail runs for the aid station out in the mountains. But, not a whole lot in the last few years. Just, I don't know, my body likes to just do the farming thing right now.
Yeah, right. So if you come from your kind of functional nutrition background, because a lot of the people that listen to this show are the athletes, that's actually somewhere where I have trouble too. It's like if I, my long run days are around 19 to 25 miles, anywhere in there. How do you fuel? Do you rely on the typical high sugar kind of fuels, or what? How do you fuel yourself?
Yeah, when I do still actually go out for some really great just runs in the woods for hours, which would probably be about 20 miles. I take packets of almond butter and those little meat sticks. So I refuel with protein and fat now.
Okay.
But my body I have reset my metabolic response to tolerate a more keto refueling method. I spend a lot of the day in ketosis, and you can't do that right out of the gate.
Right.
If someone's Standard American, you gotta work your way into the ketosis type of lifestyle, or you'll have, the hangry means you're having a maladaptation in your metabolic response.
Yeah, so I did the keto thing for a very long time. That was one of the things I noticed that went away with it is you don't get hangry anymore. Even if you're hungry, you're not hangry. Mm-mm. And even if you're not in ketosis, so I don't do that anymore.
Borderline ketosis.
Right. Yeah. I do like a little bit of intermittent fasting. Usually like Mondays I don't eat. I got some weird things. But it seems like even if you have this metabolic flexibility built in, you still don't get that like hangry feeling.
Yeah, no, but I have seen people when they're first going into that or trying that type of keto lifestyle, they do have some issues. So you just kind of, you have to wean off,
right?
Burning glucose for ATP and get into burning ketones for ATP. It's not an overnight process, especially if you're an endurance athlete.
Yeah, right.
So,
it's a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll take, dates out and some fruit. Dried fruit out on a long run too.
Okay.
It really depends on how I'm feeling for that day.
Right.
Fuel wise.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Coconut water and bone broth. Those are the other two that I go with for electrolytes because I don't get into a lot of the just like really marketed sports drinks. They're so high in sugar and the electrolyte profile doesn't even seem natural. And I have a problem where you're like, you can either, take too many or you don't get enough and you're like washing them out of your cells constantly. All the sodium's leaving your cells because you're overhydrated. That's the problems I've ran into. So like coconut water and bone broth. Yeah. Yeah. So do you work your way up Maslow's hierarchy with your clients or do you typically just kind of stay down there?
I do work our way up. It's a messy process that takes time. We're talking, it can take up to a year for someone to gravitate up finally, because we have most people are walking cases of trauma, childhood trauma, walking cases of just really deep-seated emotional issues, self-hate, confidence issues. It's very messy. Yeah. Yeah. So I just try to plant the seeds of not pushing a philosophy as much as you've got to get to know yourself. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like you just learn to get to know yourself. You may not have ever met that person.
Right.
And some parts of you are still 5. And so you need to grow those people up and, just kind of work on that.
Yeah. So. Well, how do you, is this just through a conversation? Like, because there's a lot of people I think that are walking around, like you just said, they don't know themselves. They're very disconnected from who they really are. Yeah. And that's just a matter of like we receive all these inputs our whole life and we're like pinballs just getting bounced around like should I go here? Nope, you got to go over there. It's like okay, I got to go over there. And so how do people begin that process? So we got the food thing. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend like do people start meditating?
Yes, definitely meditating or in functional medicine we call that mindfulness. But I also I work mostly with women who have young children and I work a lot on values. So placing value on herself, the woman, and becoming it's the joke phrase that they always say is like you're the nicest asshole I've ever met. And so I try to coach people to be a nice asshole. Okay. Which is just placing value on your time and who you spend your time with and because there's just a lot of people out there you don't need to be wasting your time with. Yeah. There's a lot of activities you don't need to waste your time doing. So we really lean up life. We purge stuff in their house. I'm big minimalist. I love being a minimalist in my own life. So I help them declutter people and things. Okay. So that they can start to hear a little bit more of what's going on around them. Yeah.
And so like at the end of the day, you're really not an asshole. You're just prioritizing yourself, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not an asshole, but I am definitely an asshole in the modern through the modern lens to many people.
But it's this idea, it's the, way overused, approach that, like, if you're on a plane, you got to, like, take the oxygen yourself before you help the next person, right? Yeah. Okay, so...
Most people don't do that. They just, you ask someone, why are you doing the following things on a given day? And they just cannot tell you why. Right. Why are your children doing these things? They can't tell you why.
Yeah. Yeah, on some level, you just have to be fit for service, right? And if you can't handle your own shit, you definitely can't help anybody else, bottom line. So let's talk a little bit about the minimalist thing because I've never had any kind of minimalist on here necessarily.
Mm.
Like how did you start? Did you start throwing shit away? Like how did you start that process?
We actually built a house about 7 years ago now in the suburbs, and when we moved, we just got rid of everything and
Yep.
just put nothing in the house. But then it was kind of a nicer neighborhood, so everybody kept walking into our house, looking around, and saying, "Oh, what are you going to do with the place?" And we said, "We're not doing anything. This is it." We had a big playground, like a wooden playground for the kids, and a couch, and it was just that was it,
Yeah.
and our beds. But then we moved out to the farm and just kept that mindset going. We're big outdoor recreation people, so we want to have our resources outside, which means we don't want to have anything inside that we're bound to. So,
do you have a TV?
We do.
Okay.
We definitely have a TV. We don't turn on often, but we have a really nice projector, and it's a great television. But we utilize it when we want.
Right.
But we just have seating, TV, nothing on the walls, bed. It's just a simple. I mean, I homeschool my 4 children out of there, and we still don't have a lot of stuff as an education center. It's freeing to not have to wake up every day and say, well, I have a long list of things I have to do before I can work on self-actualization.
Right. Okay, so that's a really good point because you wake up, and so do you check your cell phone right away when you wake up? Because that's what I feel like I wake up and I get like almost bombarded with like emails and notifications, and I swear to God, like I'll shut them off, and I don't know if my phone just turns them back on or what, but I just feel like it's like my it's like constant, right? And it's hard to get into, and I like to write in the morning, but it's super hard to get into any kind of state where you can flow because you're just pushing shit out of the way, trying to get to yourself at some point.
I generally don't access any of that until a few hours after I wake up.
Really?
And it's hard.
Yeah.
On some days because I really want to see if I got feedback and likes. I need that dopamine response to people like me.
Yeah.
But...
Well, and they know you do, right? And like that's a crazy thing too. Like I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, but I was talking with Simon Sinek, and he was telling me like basically like these phones are engineered. They know that you need this dopamine, and so if you post a picture. They know how to give you that dopamine. So they're going to show it to a certain amount of people so you get a whole bunch of likes up front. But there's going to be a lot of people that's why the algorithm isn't chronological on a timeline for Instagram or Facebook. It's because they want to be able to show these to people so that you get a constant trickle of dopamine over the next few days from that post. And so it's like...
disturbing.
Yeah, well, it sucks because it's us, right? It's like you're not doing experiments on fucking machines. These are human beings that you're wiring to your phone right now.
And you're messing with our self-esteem, our confidence, a lot of personal layers of development.
Yeah.
Growth. That's a mindfuck.
Right.
But we also need to participate. So there's that conundrum again.
Yeah.
These are the mediums to get information out.
And so doing what you're doing, it just seems like such a complex problem to solve because there's so many layers.
It is. And living the lifestyle is the best way. Is I can say, this is how I live. I will share with you how I live. You can take or leave what you want, but this is actually possible. And the same with my children. There's plenty of children in my house that you can kind of look to say, wow, they're actually okay with that really weird lifestyle y'all have.
Right.
The Captain Fantastic type of joke that I hear all the time. Anybody who's seen that movie. So, I think that's probably the most important thing we can do is just live it but then we have to tell people about it.
Right. So if you Google, like, what do people want? The number one thing across polls in the entire Western culture, they want more happiness. Do you think that now you are measurably happier than you were prior to this lifestyle?
Absolutely.
Really?
Resilient too. I mean, I lost my father almost 3.5 months ago, very traumatically and unexpectedly.
Oh, wow.
And if that would have happened to me 8 years ago, it would have wrecked me for years. I was not resilient to that kind of, but this time around, it's hard. It's very sad. It's a very sad story, but I have peace. I mean, the peace is in the heart.
Right.
When you have peace, that's the whole idea behind quote unquote peace is that it really doesn't matter what happens. You can find that peace with it because it's just the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that would not have been the case for me 8 or 9 years ago.
But why do you think this lifestyle has allowed that? Because do you think it's just a better understanding of things, or?
No, I think it's because I spend a lot of time bored and contemplating.
Hmm.
And I allow for that. I want every day, I just want to have time to just be. I sit outside with my chickens or I'm with my children through the woods for hours. That's very hard to make time for.
Yeah, you're making me anxious just talking about it. I'm like,
I
no, what would I do?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I just recently actually read Bored to Brilliant. It's a great little book speaking about boredom studies, but I find that to be one of the best ways to keep that peace.
Mm.
It's just contemplation, open-ended boredom. They call it boredom. I don't know what
Right.
the right word is for it. I
Right.
don't feel bored at all. I feel quite stimulated, and it's really euphoric.
Right, because you're just in thought. You're not dealing
Yeah.
with any kind of input.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
interesting.
incredible. And I love going out on a long run in the woods. I think that's why ultra runners just have, a lot of us have that
Yeah.
peace, because there's nothing like running for just the whole day in the woods. I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I think there's so many different elements that transcend the physical, concept of just moving forward or just running. Beyond that, there's all this idea that like the metronome of your feet even, I think, lull you into this kind of interesting state of meditation. And then there's the fact that your brain doesn't necessarily need anything to focus on, so it frees up a huge percentage of your brain to kind of, get lost in thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I am constantly exploring because I kind of got into the ultra world a couple of years ago, and I'm just constantly like just exploring like all of these different avenues that seem to keep opening up from this sport. And they're so much more than physical. It's super interesting.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's why I gravitated towards it after being a triathlete.
Yeah.
The ultra running world tends to be in the woods in beautiful sectors of nature.
Yeah.
So for me, that was probably more what I was going for versus, these crazy 100-mile runs.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about like just, fighting it out in the kind of original proving grounds. It's like very intoxicating, I guess.
Yeah. And you fall in a mud hole. I mean, just these things are incredible.
Right. Right.
All
these things that we are conditioned to avoid, though.
Right.
Yeah.
But once you experience it, it's like when you just want to scream from a mountaintop once you're up there, and it just comes out. The wild part of you just comes out.
Right. Yeah, definitely. All right. So I didn't give you this question beforehand. I typically do, but if it takes you a little while to answer, it's not a big deal. So the Lionheart Kicker is the final question, and we ask every guest, if you could give blanket advice, and we're guaranteed everybody in the world would hear it, and they might not all follow it, but they would definitely hear your advice, what would you tell people? And it can be based on, your life experience. It can be based on, a lot of the things you've studied with ancestral health. I mean, just if you were given a platform and you could tell people something, what would you tell them?
I would say maybe spend about a week meditating on this first, but then sit down and write a letter to yourself that's your value proposition. That's it. Just what do you place value on for yourself? And then make an action plan.
To get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be overnight, but I just don't believe many people have a great value proposition for themselves.
Can we break that down a little bit? So what exactly are they? They're just writing things that they're into? Like
It's
sports?
Just free format.
Okay.
Free format value proposition. You can break it down between business and professional, or business and personal. If you
And these things are like what you desire in life?
Desire, yeah, but I mean more of placing, what do you place value in your time? So you could analyze a Saturday when you don't have to go to work. What do you do? And did you enjoy that? That's what saved me, was going back as a young adult, and when I had the ability to transition my career with some flexibility, I sat down and said, what just really helped me as a young adolescent find myself? What were the areas that were euphoric for me, and why would I have to give that up now that I'm an adult?
Right.
And I just wrote them down, and that's now how my life is.
Right.
10 years later, I've got it.
Damn.
So
I think
it wasn't easy.
Right. I'm sure. I think one of the beautiful things about that is that you will also be able to see in looking at that list all of the things you're giving time to that don't serve you.
Right.
Right. And that's probably even more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Because that's always a continuous process improvement type of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
modern inputs don't go away, and you will have periods of time where you've wasted some of your time because you got away from your value statement. But that state, you get back to it.
Right.
So you got to have something to go back to when you veer off course.
Right. So for people that are listening to this and they like the things that you said and maybe they want to work with you or just kind of support what you're doing, where's the best place for them to do that?
On Instagram, I post a good bit. It's Ashley Grosch.
Okay.
And then my website, thefarmlife.com. I've got a little email list where I send out rants.
Okay.
I call them rants, but little essays. As I write my book, I will send out excerpts and little essays.
Oh, perfect. When's the book coming out?
Oh, I don't know.
Don't know yet.
Hopefully 6
Not there yet.
months.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track in delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland